Tales of Mithrym.
Skeleton Crew, read by Lorenzo, Part 2, Becalmed. A few days had passed and the weather had only gotten hotter. There was not a cloud in the sky as Elvin made his way out onto the deck to look out. He sat down next to a pile of metal that quickly began to stir and turned out to be Ducky. He had slept the night on deck to avoid the close heat of the cabins. "Morning," Elvin smiled. Ducky pulled himself up to sit beside him. "Is it?" "Certainly is," Elvin laughed. "How did you sleep?" Ducky groaned. "Oh, I didn't really." He grunted and spat onto the deck. "The air's getting so thick now." "I know what you mean." "How much longer do you think it'll be?" Ducky craned to look at the horizon. There was still no sight of land in any direction. "I could not say." Elvin leant back, arms raised and hands behind his head. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the air. "Are you looking forward to getting there?" "What, to Kanath?" "Sure. I do wonder what it will be like. When I enlisted, they asked me if I wanted to serve there or in Gallio. I decided to stay close to home." He sighed. "Things could have gone very differently." "So how much longer do you think it'll be?" Ducky asked again. "Forever, if we can't get a good wind." A voice boomed from behind them, startling them both to sit full upright. They turned to look and met the gaze of the captain, a tall woman dressed in the same loose working clothes as the crew. She had been wearing a long gilded frock coat and a tricorn hat when they first set sail. In the heat, though, she had doffed the coat but kept the hat. She smiled a friendly smile as she lowered her silk scarf and took a deep breath of the air. "Is that so?" Elvin asked. "Certainly," the captain continued, walking past them and looking out at the sea. "It's been calm as a mill pond out there for 2 days straight." She turned back to look at Elvin and Ducky. "Blimey, hadn't you noticed?" Just then, the door to the cabins opened again, and this time Derville stepped out. She wandered over to them and leant against the base of the mast. "Noticed what?" she asked. "We haven't moved an inch," the captain sighed. "We're becalmed." Gesturing to the deck, the three of them noticed that the sailors were all either standing idly at their posts or resting in the heat. There seemed to be little to no activity at all on the deck. "How long does this usually last?" Derville asked. "It's hard to say," the captain sighed again. "Could be an hour, could be a week. My fear is that it's the latter. Not that we've got cargo as would spoil. Problem is we've got precious little left at all." She moved in close to Derville, Ducky and Elvin and lowered her voice as she continued. "Truth be told, if we can't find land or another ship or something else soon, we'll be out of food in about a day." "Surely there's something we could do." Elvin stood up, seemingly readying himself for the action. The captain hushed him and glowered slightly. "I'm all for it if you lot fancy lending a hand, but do me a favour, try not to stir things up." She seemed to think for a moment. "Fancy another go at fishing? Number 1 should have a net or two. Try casting them and see what you can get." "Come on then," he said, in what Ducky had come to recognize as Elvin's lieutenant voice. The captain muttered something and walked away. With some effort, Elvin eventually convinced Ducky to get up and the three of them made their way to see the first mate. The nets on the ship were old and they had been patched and repaired many times before, but they took them and prepared to cast them out into the sea. Far below them, the water was gently lapping at the sides of the ship, and they could see movement deep beneath the surface that, as the eye adjusted, appeared to be seaweed and other plants. For a moment, Ducky thought he saw something dart across, but he shook it off as nothing more than the light of the sun working on the ripples of the water. With a great heave, he cast one net out. Elvin and Derville held a corner each, firm aboard the ship, bracing against the sides. The thick ropes of the net hit the water hard, and a small spray was thrown up that tinged the air with the taste of salt. They watched as it fell beneath the surface and waited for any sign or sense of movement. After a while, they heaved it hard back onto the deck. Various plants seemed to have caught themselves in the lines, but sadly, nothing else. They cleared the nets and raided them again for another throw. 3 more times they cast and hauled the nets with nothing but a handful of seaweed to show for their troubles. The sun was riding high in the sky as they debated trying again. "I can't keep this up," Ducky growled, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Once more," Elvin insisted. "Then we stop and wait for evening." There was a general grunt of agreement from everyone and they cast the net again. They were about ready to haul up and go inside, when all of a sudden there was a strong lurch as the net was pulled hard into the water. The corners held to the ship tightened hard against the railings and the whole vessel rolled hard to the side, throwing many of the sailors to the deck. Elvin, Ducky and Derville braced hard against the side and each grabbed a hold of the ropes. Try as they could though, the net would not come up. After a moment, the crew began running to see what was happening. Many, quite instinctively, grabbed hard at the net too, and soon a team of about 10 were pulling hard to haul it in. As they brought it up, the ship began to roll back, causing some to lose their balance and likewise their grip on the ropes. Each time the ship lurched and rolled again as they all struggled to keep a purchase on it. After a long fight, they began to draw it out of the water. As they did, they saw many plants and weeds wrapped around an enormous, writhing fishtail. With one last great pull, they drew the whole thing over the edge and onto the deck. Ducky, Elvin, and Derville, along with the crew, fell down hard as they surrounded the hull. There was a moment of confusion as they each tried to take in the image before them. With a cry of surprise, one sailor reached in to remove some of the seaweed to get a better look. She soon regretted it though, as she was pulled suddenly into it all. Was that an arm? Elvin craned to see better. It looked like a... Derville began, but her voice trailed off as they all caught sight of her face, its eyes fixed on the crowd and its mouth opened wide to reveal rows of long, sharp, piercing teeth. Another sailor gasped, then shouted loudly, "Mermaid!"
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.